You're watching a Highwire Media podcast.
Let's take a look at a twofold criminal charge. One of the phases was settled years ago. The second phase was settled late last week. West Virginia pharmacist will now spend her life behind bars. 42-year-old Natalie Cochran and her husband Michael, who was near the same age as Natalie when they met and married, had developed what some would say is the American dream. Together they had 2 children, Nicole and Ashton. Together they lived comfortably in their upper-class world. Together, they own 2 businesses, Technology Management Solutions and Tactical Solutions Group. Right off the bat, the vagueness of the titles of these businesses left me asking, are these made-up companies? Well, it turns out they kind of were. Natalie seemed to be taking money and property as collateral from individuals, financial institutions, and several small companies. She was gathering assets and cash from all over the place with the promise that if these investors poured money into TSG and TMS, she would take their investment and reinvest it into government contracts that her company could facilitate and secure. She claimed, hey, my 2 companies are going to make millions. If you invest, you can have your piece of the pie, your portion of millions. Like I said, it's pretty vague, and even after my research, it's still vague. TMS was allegedly involved in government-wide acquisition contracts. It was a company that provided cost-effective and innovative solutions for information technology requirements. Yeah, still confused because I am. TSG also claimed to offer custom engineering services, which included communication systems, telemetry, digital video signal intelligence, special ops support for the government and military. All in all, she convinced 11 people to invest approximately $2.5 million in these alleged government contracts. The investors paid with personal checks, cashier checks, or wire transfer. But business-savvy Natalie didn't invest that money. Instead, she absorbed it into her personal life and bank accounts. The investors received very little back. That's called a Ponzi scheme. And Natalie was hip-deep in her fabricated version of 2 companies and the contracts they hadn't secured. She had no contracts. They were just plain made up. She did all of this from June 2017 to August 2019. During that time, she used some of the money from late investors to pay earlier investors, just to buy herself some time and develop a quasi-verified reputation. But she was just shuffling money around. No returns on investments existed because there were no contracts. To keep up appearances, she bought a 1965 Shelby Cobra. She also spent money on lavish jewelry, trips, and an extravagant lifestyle, just to convince people she really was business-savvy Natalie. February of 2019, the wheels started to come off of the operation. Michael was having a day where he just didn't feel well. He was so sick that even friends were concerned. After consulting with friends, Natalie shook off their concerns by saying she would just let Michael sleep it off. Because that always helps when someone is feeling seriously ill. Remember, she's a pharmacist. She has medical knowledge. But sleeping it off wasn't the answer. Michael, who was 38 years old at the time, passed out at home. Natalie left him on the couch, passed out for several hours. Eventually, she called for help. Michael was transported to a regional hospital. While there, tests revealed that Michael had a blood glucose level of 21. That's dangerously low. Normal levels should range from 70 to about 180 depending on whether a person has just eaten. So 70 is already low. Michael's level was 21. When glucose is that low, a person may lose consciousness or even fall into a coma. Medical personnel couldn't repair the damage done to Michael's body. He was sent home on hospice care and died 5 days later. Natalie and Michael had been married for 19 years. 19 years of memories. They had 2 kids together, 2 businesses, almost 2 decades of life experience, and yet no funeral was held. His obituary, bare bones. No mention of a career, no places they had lived, no hobbies, nothing. When Natalie was asked why nothing was done for Michael in terms of a memorial service, she said that Michael had always requested that no funeral be held. For most people in Natalie and Michael's lives, the next few months left them baffled. Michael's death did not seem accidental, and Natalie's Ponzi scheme was about to be discovered. In November of that year, 9 months after Michael's death, Natalie was arrested by the federal government and charged with federal wire fraud and money laundering. 1 year after her arrest, she settled for a plea deal with the feds. She had been in prison during that time while awaiting trial, and the eventual plea deal. She was also awaiting a possible murder charge, but we'll get to that in a second. After her plea deal, Natalie was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. During her sentencing, she admitted that she had caused financial hardship to those who had invested with her. All that she still owned was seized. She owed $2.6 million in restitution to her victims. Even with the seizure of her bank accounts and assets, she wasn't going to be able to pay all of that back. And what about her two children who were teenagers at the time, Nicole and Ashton? Natalie's mother, Daphne Jessup, was granted custody. This was tough on the kids. They were still mourning the loss of their father, and now their mother had been exposed as a thief and potentially a murderer. While the feds developed their case for the Ponzi scheme, local police charged Natalie with the murder of her husband, Michael, but they dropped the charges. It seemed they didn't feel like they had enough evidence to make the murder charge stick. To gather more evidence, they exhumed Michael's body. Following further examination, murder charges were filed again. Authorities believe Natalie had injected Michael with a dangerous dose of insulin, causing him to pass out on the couch. Her unwillingness to get medical attention allowed damage to his organs, which ultimately led to his death. In January of this year, Natalie finally faced a jury of her peers, charged with first-degree murder. Friends of the couple were called to the stand by the state to testify about the day Michael felt ill. John Hamilton, a family friend and state police trooper, was called by Natalie that morning. She asked him to come over and check on Michael. He testified that he told Natalie that Michael needed immediate medical attention. She chose not to heed his voice. Then Natalie's good friend, Jennifer Davis, testified that Natalie had messaged her, saying that both she and Michael were sick. He told Jennifer that if she could get her hands on some insulin, her symptoms would likely subside. Jennifer said she would share her insulin with Natalie. Jennifer's husband delivered the medication to the Cochran home. Hours later, Natalie texted a picture of Michael passed out on the floor to Jennifer. Yet she still did not heed the advice to take him to the hospital. Jennifer also testified that when Michael was returned home on hospice, Natalie asked her to help hold a pillow over Michael's face because it was too difficult to watch him die this way. When the Ponzi scheme was brought up in court, Natalie's attorney tried to shift the blame. They argued that Michael was the one running the Ponzi scheme, not Natalie. They claimed that Natalie worked full-time, making $120,000 a year as a pharmacist, while Michael was unemployed. The defense also suggested that Michael was the one who got his parents involved in the scheme, and that all the documents had his name on them. Even the P.O. boxes for the companies were registered in his name. But the prosecutor pushed back hard on that claim. He argued that Natalie poisoned Michael because he wanted out of the scheme. Michael was tired of ripping off friends and family. He knew the money wasn't coming in, and he was ready to walk away. That, the state argued, was Natalie's motive. The trial also revealed some damning evidence. During a search of the Cochran home following Michael's death, police found 3 vials. One labeled as insulin, one labeled as a steroid, and a third with no label at all. The defense claimed there was zero proof that Michael had been injected with insulin, but the prosecution called in 2 expert witnesses. First, an FBI forensic examiner testified that the vial labeled insulin had been punctured by a needle, meaning it had been used. Second, probably going to butcher this, an endocrinologist and diabetes expert took the stand. She confirmed that when Michael was admitted to the hospital, his glucose level was 21, a dangerously low number. While she couldn't say for certain that his low glucose was the result of an insulin injection, she testified that she didn't believe it was caused by malnutrition or any other drugs. The prosecution was close to wrapping up their case, but they had one more witness to call, a state trooper who had investigated the case. He revealed that Natalie had given police 3 different versions of what happened that day Michael collapsed. First, she said they were together in the house when Michael went in the kitchen and collapsed on the floor. She claimed she later found the steroid bottle on the counter. Second story, she said Michael collapsed and hit his head on the kitchen counter. This time she said the steroid vial was in the cupboard. And third, she claimed Michael collapsed while injecting himself with insulin in his back. The inconsistencies were glaring. The trooper also reviewed text messages between Michael and Natalie. Based on their conversations, he believed that Michael was completely unaware of how serious the Ponzi scheme situation had become. In fact, he believed Michael still thought the 2 of them were about to take a trip to Virginia, a trip scheduled for the day after he collapsed. That trip, it was supposed to involve picking up money that was meant to be repaid to investors. When the defense began calling witnesses, Natalie's 2 children took the stand. Both Nicole and Ashton testified that their father had a steady diet of supplements and steroids. They claimed that on most days, Michael was taking about 40 pills. He also said Michael had been ill long before the day he collapsed in February. While they described him as fit, they said he often complained of headaches, forgetfulness, and dizzy spells. Both kids also testified that Michael spent a lot of time at the computer, working on the alleged government contracts. The defense used this to argue that Michael was just as involved in the Ponzi scheme as Natalie. Then, Natalie's sister testified. She claimed she had personally seen Michael inject himself with substances before, though she admitted she didn't know what the injections were. Two defense experts also took the stand. They argued that the two autopsies conducted on Michael's body never established an official cause of death. Then, Michael's family doctor testified. He revealed that Natalie had actually been seen at his office the day before Michael collapsed. She was too sick to travel to Virginia. He advised them to cancel the trip. It all boiled down to this. The state argued that Natalie's motive was to silence her husband before he could expose the Ponzi scheme. They also emphasized that there was no natural reason for a healthy 38-year-old man to have a glucose level of 21 unless he was injected with insulin. The prosecutor also pointed out that multiple people had warned Natalie to take Michael to the hospital. Even though she had medical knowledge as a pharmacist, she chose not to. They also highlighted the fact that even after Michael's death, Natalie kept asking people for money. He was still trying to keep the Ponzi scheme going. The defense, on the other hand, painted Michael as a drug user. They claimed his excessive use of steroids and supplements was the real reason for his dangerously low blood sugar. Natalie's attorney even admitted that she was running a Ponzi scheme. He called her a big girl who cheated people out of money, but he insisted that she wasn't a murderer. The verdict? Jury didn't take long, just 2 hours. They returned with a guilty verdict. But there was more. They also returned with a no mercy verdict, meaning Natalie Cochran was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As I was diving into this story, I couldn't stop thinking about Nicole and Ashton. They were just 12 and 10 years old when all this happened. They had to testify in court. They were hoping that their mom would be out of federal prison in about 5 years. Now those hopes are completely gone. Testimony revealed that there was ongoing conflict between the paternal and maternal grandparents, Michael's parents and Natalie's parents, who had been fighting over custody of the kids. And that fighting is still going on today. It's heartbreaking. There's even video footage out there of the kids begging for mercy for their mother. If you want to find it, it's out there. At the end of the day, the courtroom was full of broken people. And at the root of all that pain, money. And now on to our next topic. Well, it's a new month, so we're due for another new lawsuit against Sean P. Diddy Combs. This time, the suit has been filed by an anonymous male singer regarding an alleged incident from 2015 at an after-party in Los Angeles. And just like some other lawsuits, this one is being handled by Texas-based litigation attorney Tony Busby. The lawsuit was filed Monday in the New York County Supreme Court. According to the file, the promising up-and-coming singer, who was 23 years old at the time, claims that he and P. Diddy had crossed paths in the music scene. Through their conversations, the young singer, identified in the lawsuit as John Doe, believed that P. Diddy had promised him a record deal with Bad Boy Records in a one-on-one studio session with P. Diddy himself. Tony Busby, the attorney handling the case, says John Doe was already gaining traction in the music industry by 2015. He had performed as an opening act for well-known artists and had multiple nightclub appearances in trendy LA venues. One such performance took place at QC's 2020 nightclub in Montebello, California. According to the lawsuit, a longtime associate of P. Diddy allegedly approached John Doe that night and told him that P. Diddy was in attendance specifically to watch him perform. The associate allegedly told John Doe that if he gave a top-notch performance, P. Diddy would offer him a record deal. After the performance, John Doe attended an after-party. That's where things allegedly took a dark turn. At the after-party, John Doe claims that someone handed him an alcoholic beverage. He was told that the drink had been sent over by P. Diddy. After taking a few sips, John Doe said he began feeling dazed and eventually lost consciousness. As he drifted in and out of consciousness, he allegedly witnessed multiple people in the room engaging in sexual acts. At times when he was coherent, he claims he saw other guests appearing to be drugged and assaulted, much like what he feared was happening to him. At one point, John Doe says he regained consciousness to find that when his pants had been removed, P. Diddy was groping him. He alleges that he believes more aggressive sexual activity had taken place before he regained consciousness. According to the lawsuit, John Doe tried to resist, but P. Diddy allegedly threatened him. saying that if he didn't comply, he would contact his manager, ruin his chances in the music industry. Then after this encounter, P. Diddy allegedly demanded that John Doe have sex with a woman he didn't even know. John Doe said he agreed, but only because he was trying to escape. He asked if he could use the bathroom first, and once he got up, he left and never returned. Of course, everyone's asking, why is John Doe speaking out now? According to the lawsuit, John Doe never reported the abuse at the time because he was afraid of being blackballed in the industry. However, he claims that the alleged incident caused him mental and emotional pain so severe that it derailed his music career entirely. This is just one of dozens of civil lawsuits that have been filed against P. Diddy in recent months. But here's what's different. P. Diddy is also facing criminal charges of racketeering, sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution, is currently detained in the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, and his upcoming trial is scheduled to begin on May 5th. I have no idea who John Doe is. I'm sure the internet is buzzing with guesses, but ultimately it's up to him to reveal his identity if he chooses to. However, I'm waiting to see if a higher profile celebrity comes forward with similar allegations. If someone well known speaks out, then I think it could completely change the trajectory of these cases. Of course, that's a heavy lift, one that someone's mental health may not be ready to handle. Either way, as always, I'll keep you updated as this trial gets closer. Now we're going to shift our focus to Idaho. It's been a while since we've talked about Idaho without mentioning, obviously, Brian Koberger, who allegedly murdered 4 college students in Moscow, Idaho. But this one isn't anywhere near that bad. It's just a guy stealing from Walmart. But man, was this guy creative. 32-year-old Dylan Rockwell was arrested on Monday after Walmart employees reported a burglary in process. By the time police arrived, Dylan had already left the store, but it didn't take long for them to track him down. And when they did, Dylan confessed to stealing from Walmart, not just once, but on multiple occasions. Dylan had a pretty nifty way of stealing. He would wear a ring, and on that ring, he had a barcode for a Campbell's can of tomato soup. That's right, $1 can of soup. Here's how it worked. Dylan would walk into the Walmart, load up an expensive item like a gas grill, then he would go to self-checkout. Instead of scanning the actual item, he would scan the barcode on his ring. The one for the $1 can of soap. He would pay a little over $1 with tax, get his receipt, and walk out the door with his purchased gas grill. It actually worked for a while, until the door worker caught on. Dylan tried to leave with the $300 gas grill, but was stopped. When police tracked him down at his home, he was arrested without incident. Now he's being charged with felony burglary, misdemeanor petty theft, and currently being held on a $25,000 bond. I mean, look, Dylan, you're a pretty creative dude, but you just weren't a good thief. And before we move on, let's give me your thoughts in the comment section below on all these news updates that I'm offering. Any thoughts? Where do you think these cases go from moving forward? And finally, update on the Ellen Greenberg case. Let's finish today with a quick update on the Ellen Greenberg case. This one haunts me, and hopefully we can finally start to get some answers now that her case has been reopened in Pennsylvania. Back in 2011, Ellen Greenberg returned to the apartment she shared with her fiancé. He was home early that day and started cutting up fruit in the kitchen. Her fiancé had gone to the gym. When he returned, he said he found the door locked. When he finally broke the door down, he found Ellen dead with 20 stab wounds. She was slumped in the corner of the kitchen cabinets. The fruit she had been cutting was still partially cut up on the counter. At first, her death was ruled a homicide, but then something strange happened. The crime scene was released almost immediately within hours. Then suddenly, the pathologist changed his ruling, determined that Ellen had actually died by suicide, even though she had been stabbed 20 times. And even though some of those wounds were at the base of her skull, injuries that should have killed her instantly. Yet, according to this revised ruling, she was somehow still able to stab herself through the skull, stab herself in the chest, delivering the fatal blow. It makes no sense. From the moment the ruling was changed, Ellen's parents never stopped fighting. They filed multiple motions and lawsuits trying to get the city of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Attorney General, or state investigators to review the case. And finally, after more than a decade, they succeeded. As part of a settlement agreement, the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office agreed to reopen the investigation. What led to the investigation? Or I should say, reopening the investigation, a major turning point in the case was that the former pathologist who changed his ruling from homicide to suicide submitted a sworn statement saying he was wrong to change his ruling. Let me repeat that. The same pathologist who ruled Ellen's death as suicide now says he was wrong The lawsuit also reveals serious flaws to the original investigation. For example, the knife found in Ellen's chest was never fingerprinted. The apartment, which was turned over to the family immediately, showed signs of a struggle. And as part of the settlement, Ellen's parents received a monetary payout, though the amount hasn't been disclosed. But for them, it was never about the money. They just want justice for their daughter. A former pathologist says that new information has come to light, which has raised even more questions about Ellen's death. The timing and method of her fiancé entering the apartment are now in question. There is reason to believe Ellen's body was moved before 911 was called, or at least before emergency responders arrived. For years, forensic experts have argued that the blood pooling and dripping in the apartment didn't match how Ellen was allegedly found in the kitchen. But does this mean we'll finally get an official ruling of homicide? Maybe not. Here's the reality. This former pathologist doesn't work for the city anymore. His opinion doesn't necessarily match what the current medical examiner's office believes. And based on the complete silence from the Philadelphia Police Department, the medical examiner's office, the mayor's office, I'd say there's a strong chance they're still not planning to change the ruling. For now, the Greenbergs are saying that if this is all they get, then it's enough. They just want some official acknowledgement that their daughter did not take her own life. But if this case gets a true reinvestigation, I'll be watching, and I'll let you know the second something happens. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Crime and Coffee. You can catch us next Tuesday for more on the latest updates and crime news. Of course, if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring new hosts, be able to pay them, and of course, take this show on the road. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you next time.